Ink up, slow down, write your rhythm with script and scribe. Have you heard of Tom Hessen? If yes, that's great, but chances are, like me, that this is a fairly new brand to you. And that's the key thing. It only seems new, but it isn't really, because look here, 1870. The name goes back 5 generations to Birmingham's pen industry in the 1800s, when a large proportion of the world's pens were made there. So this isn't a startup figuring things out, it's more a return. But before we get into the actual pen that I have in this box, it took me down a rabbit hole learning about Tom Hessen and the fact that they started off in Birmingham, because I then learned that Birmingham has a pen museum, something I didn't know, and they're not that far away, so I can travel to Birmingham easily and check out the pen museum. So that is going to be on my to-do list for this year. But let's have a look at the pen. When deciding which one of their pen models to pick, I realized their approach is fairly consistent. Standard international cartridge converter system, steel nibs, and classic designs with subtle modernization. So I went with the Charles, which has a resin body. Some models are made of metal or wood for the body, but they all have modern convenience layered over mostly nostalgic naming and heritage references. This Charles pen is in the color Highland Green and comes with a fancy man in a kilt. On paper, of course, not in some fantasy Outlander way. And I picked the Charles because it felt like the foundation of the brand's relaunch rather than another option within their range. And notice the finial, because this is the original Tom Hessen finial. But here I've got a cultured emerald, and this is the Cult Pens exclusive 20 limited edition pens. The rest is the standard base model. So this is a high polish resin pen with minimal trim. It would usually have a logo on the finial, but of course mine doesn't. There is no cap band, so very little branding. And there is the brand on the nib, but the nib is a standard Yovo. And I really like these popular size 6 Yovo nibs because I change the angle at which I write a lot and I never find they skip. And also, it's great for cursive as well as print. And if I flip over this fine nib, it writes extra fine without skipping either. The other thing is I felt like it had an independent maker feel because of not having that cap band, but of course there are exceptions. I mean, Sailor does a ringless 1911 as well. I also feel that a lot of vintage pens have a slender profile, and in this case, obviously not that slender, but although it's large, it's not oversized, and it makes it feel modern, but not necessarily as chunky as some of the really popular trendy ones. And we'll do some comparisons now. And first up, my chunkiest pen, which is the Opus 88 Omar Demonstrator. And then we have the Asvine C80, which is taller and a little bit wider or girthier. And then we have the TWSBI Eco. If you're not new to the channel, you'll know that I love my Opus 88 Omar because while it is super chunky, it is also light enough for me not to get tired of using it. And I feel that way about this pen. You don't have that trade-off. It's not so slim that it causes strain and not so heavy that it becomes fatiguing over longer writing sessions. So it's got a nice lightness to it without being overly light. And on top of it, I just like the length of it as well. So when I post it, I don't like it. It doesn't balance right. But unposted, perfect. I can't say I'm a fan of this clip. I think that it's really tight against the cap. So you can see I'm struggling to put my fingernail under there. And I think it just needs to have more flexibility for you to pop it into your shirt pocket or to make it functional, but I guess it stops the pen still rolling off surfaces. So in that way, it's okay. And then you've got the 5 diamonds representing the 5 generations. I don't know if some of the other models have a more flexible clip, but I do think, if I'm being picky, that they are more aesthetically pleasing. Still, it is functional, and the positive is that they didn't stick with just this clip for all their pen models. Setting the cap aside, I really enjoy the simplicity of design here. It's prioritizing practicality. It's lightweight, slightly tapered, and comfortable for long writing sessions. So, overall, it's a really well balanced pen. I particularly like the way that it feels in hand. The high gloss cat's eye effect is eye catching and yet relatively restrained because there are a lot more elaborate pores out there for resin. You've got the ones that have got multi-colors, so loads of colorways, and then Esterbrook uses diamond cast resins as well. And like many modern fountain pens, especially in the mid-range, the Charles is designed around a modular system combining industry standard parts with brand specific aesthetics. So we've got the international cartridge and we've got the Yaveau nib, and then you've got the aesthetic of the brand in the body. So thinking about other resins out there, I immediately think of Esterbrook's Diamond Cast, which incorporates diamond dust for a textured sparkle. So this feels more restrained because we are in one colorway, that Highland green, and then really going into multi-tonal effects of that particular green. So this pen might not be for those who gravitate towards some of Esterbrook's most dynamic ranges with multi-colorways. However, Esterbrook has also leaned into the more restrained look with some of their series, including Back to the Land. And they've done that in the Camden model as well, because you have the very bright Northern Lights Camdens, and then you have the brushed metal ones that are far more sedate, showing a willingness to shift tone across a range. Now, Benu as well goes further into maximalism. Models like the Euphoria and Talus use swirled, shimmer embedded materials and themed hand painted finishes, pens that are pretty much like art objects. And they kept that artiness, but ramped it down a bit. And it's one of their more successful new ranges, the Haute or Haute range. And yeah, it has that balanced look and clarity of design. And that is what the Charles has, that restrained end of the spectrum of balance, usability, and clarity of design. So the Charles or the Tom Hessen brand makes me think of Esterbrook and Benu, these other mid-range fountain pens, especially the Esterbrook, because Esterbrook relaunched in the same way that Tom Hessen is now relaunching. And the fact that they started off with a particular look, a particular aesthetic, and then are now these days branching out and expanding their portfolio for a wider range of customers. So I think there's always room for a brand to branch out in any direction that they want. And this brand does feel heritage, but because it's got the modern vibes as well, I mean, it can organically shift to where it wants. The Charles, however, does feel like a really good representation or natural expression of their identity. And I reckon the Charles definitely sits easily alongside other mid range to entry level luxury fountain pens. When I decided to share my thoughts on this pen, I did not realize just how much I was going to be mentioning Esterbrook and Benu. But for me, that's actually quite natural because they have the same format or modular design: resin body, Yaveau nib, standard international cartridge. And I mean, even the Good Blue follows this modular design, but it has a metal body. Now, what is natural to me as a grouping might not feel that way to you. You might not put Esterbrook in the same category as Benu and Tom Hessen. Another popular modular pen brand is Opus 88, and for them, the Yaveau is available in 8 different line widths. So going from flex extra fine through the fine and onto the stubs like 1.1 and 1.5. The Tom Hessen comes with 4, 1.5, extra fine, fine, medium, and bold. And I would be curious to see if they decide to expand those options, but do keep in mind that you can swap your nibs between these types of pens because the Opus 88, the Tom Hessen, and the Esterbrook nibs are all the same brand of nib. So they're all Yaveau number 6 and you can swap between them. And I used my scribe from Esterbrook in my Tom Hessen, which really leads us on to Esterbrook. They have all the standard Yavo number 6 sizes, and then they have a custom nib program offering scribe nib, journaler nib, needlepoint nib, and techo. And since these are special grinds by Nibmeisters, you do have to pay more than for a standard nib. I think it's an additional £30. And while talking money, let's do a comparison. The Charles retails for £150, which is the same as Laban 326, and £20 more than the Benu Euphoria, but £25 cheaper than the Benu Haute or Oat. And Esterbrook SD 195 to 225 for the standard size. And I decided to stick in the Pelikan M200, which is £5 more than the Charles, because it is the only one with a proprietary nib. The others are all going to have a very similar feel on paper because they use the same nib, the Yavo number 6, except for the ones that have been ground, of course. Now, the Pelikan is a proprietary nib and then has a more distinctive feel on paper. But the others do diverge from one another because they'll have a different balance, a different character, and just an overall different feel. My final thoughts are that this sits really comfortably with all the other pens that I mentioned in terms of that modular framework. And I think that it is not trying to compete through any visual novelty. It is happy to be sort of a little bit laid back and yet still distinctive with that cat's eye effect. And you've got a range of colors. I'm hoping that they come out with even more. They've got 2 types of blue, a red, a black, and this Highland green. So I'd be, happy if they provided a purple one. That would be lovely. So those are my impressions, and I would love to hear yours. And tell me, would you happily group the Esterbrook SD with any of the models from Benu or the Laban 326 or this Tom Hessen Charles? And thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.